Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the thick, damp wool of a medieval villager. It's late autumn, the leaves are long gone, and the wind howls through cracks in your cottage wall like it owns the place. Your breath fogs inside your home, the animals are restless, and that ache in your bones tells you what's coming. Winter, the kind that isn't romantic, doesn't sparkle, and certainly doesn't care how tired you are. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's build a little sleepy village of our own. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're outside barely past dawn, and already your fingers are stiff and useless. The wind nips at your nose like a cranky goat. And even though you've wrapped yourself in every bit of cloth you own, twice, you still feel like a meat popsicle with chores. You trudge past your neighbor's hut where someone is already coughing like they've swallowed a pine cone. You nod because words waste breath. Breath creates steam, and steam means heat escaping. The harvest is over, and you helped gather what you could. It wasn't much. The barley was stunted, the apples worm-riddled. There were rumors that the monks at the abbey got better yields, but no one dares say it too loud. You haul the last of the firewood, 3 half-rotted logs and a bundle of damp twigs, and curse your aching back. You're 29, which makes you one of the older ones around here. Your breath comes in puffs as you squat beside the small family pig. He snorts a greeting and tries to eat your foot wraps. You consider just for a second eating him, but he's your savings account, your emergency fund, your future. You pat him instead and move on. The sky is already fading to gray, though it's barely mid-morning. Clouds roll in heavy, low, like they're bearing bad news. Which, let's face it, they probably are. Snow's coming, or sleet, or worse, ice rain, that devilish invention that glues everything in place and makes the latrine a death trap. You head back to your one-room home, ducking through the low doorway like a guilty chicken. Inside, it smells of smoke, damp straw, and people. Your grandmother nods at you from her spot by the hearth. She's been wrapped in the same blanket since St. Martin's Day. The baby is fussing, probably from hunger or cold or both. You glance at the pot hanging over the embers. Turnip water. Again, mainstream historians agree that winter was the single most dangerous season for the average peasant in medieval Europe. Food ran low, sickness ran high, and your lord didn't care whether you froze as long as your taxes were paid by planting season. The first flurries start before sundown. Just a few lazy flakes at first, dancing like tiny ghosts. You watch them through the smoke hole in the roof. That's your window. That's your forecast. It tells you everything you need to know. Tonight is going to be brutal. Your eldest son, 9, going on hardened soldier, crawls in from the barn where he's been checking the cow. She's still alive. Barely. You share a nod. That's a win. As night creeps in, your little family huddles close. The fire crackles weakly. You all sleep in one pile like potatoes in a sack. No privacy, no comfort, but plenty of shared warmth. If someone gets up to relieve themselves in the night, they better come back fast or lose their spot. There's a myth told by the village storyteller, a toothless man who insists he once saw a squirrel catch catch fire from running across a lightning-struck tree. He says that some winters, people turned into ice statues in their sleep. You laugh gently and tuck your child's feet under your armpit for warmth, but you still sleep with one eye open, just in case. Historians still argue whether peasant cottages ever got warm in winter or merely less cold. Some believe the animals sharing the space helped raise the ambient temperature. Others say that was wishful thinking, and the only real warmth came from body heat and blind determination. Tonight there's no windbreak, no insulation, no rescue coming from the manor, but you've got this far. You've stacked the wood, patched the leaks, stored your onions in a hole you dug by hand, and your grandmother hums a lullaby older than anyone remembers. Maybe, just maybe, you'll outlast this bitter wind one more time. Your hut is home, but calling it that feels generous, especially tonight. You duck under the low lintel again after a quick morning round, your shoulders brushing the edges of the door frame, as always. The interior greets you like an old, slightly rude friend, familiar, musty, and in need of repair. Inside, it's as dim as a cave. Not the cozy storybook kind, more the kind where something might be nesting in the rafters, judging by the soft scratching overhead. The walls are wattle and daub, the medieval equivalent of a bad DIY project. Sticks, mud, and a prayer hold the place together. In theory, it's designed to block out the cold. In practice, it just funnels the wind into smaller, more personal gusts. The corners of the room are wet to the touch. Not from a leak, no, that would be too simple. It's condensation, cold sweat, from walls that can't quite hold in your heat. You step onto the earthen floor, still frozen in the shaded patches. You've been trying to stomp it flat for years, but it always warps and crumbles back. There's a shallow pit near the door, from where the kids used to pretend they were digging for treasure. Now it just collects runoff from melting snow boots. The hearth is the only real piece of architecture in here. A hollow, blackened square of stone and baked clay. It's slightly off-center because the previous occupant wanted better smoke circulation, which is a polite way of saying the smoke now has two escape routes, the roof hole and your lungs. You place a new log on the fire, well, a damp branch really, and hope it doesn't hiss and die. For a moment, it smolders. Then, to your amazement, it catches, crackling like a polite applause. The fire's doing its best. You love it for that. Your wife, or brother, or mother, whoever shares this space with you, has pulled the sleeping mats away from the edges of the room. Last winter, mold crept up the sides of the bedding. Someone claimed it was alive. Someone else dared it to bite them. No one has since. Mainstream history confirms what you already know. Medieval homes were cold, dark, and smoke-choked. Chimneys weren't common in peasant houses until centuries later. Instead, smoke filled the room before seeping out through the thatch or roof hole. It left everything: walls, linens, lungs, coated in soot. The beds are simple. Straw-stuffed sacks if you're lucky, plain hay, or old rushes if not. If the mice are sleeping in them, you're at least reassured it's warm enough for rodents. A bad sign for hygiene, a good one for warmth. Tonight, you repair the shutter over the hole in the wall, your window. It's a scrap of hide, stretched and stiff. You tie it in place with a bit of old twine. No glass here. Glass is for churches and the manor house. You saw it once, glittering like frozen water in the sun, too pretty to be useful. You notice that someone left a bit of cooked millet in the pot. You smile. It's cold and congealed, but hey, it's millet. That was a feast 2 days ago. You scoop it up and offer it to the toddler, who eats it like it's cake. One of the rafters creaks, and you instinctively look up. Birds sometimes roost there, tiny ones, sneaky and smug. You let them stay. They eat bugs, and you admire their pluck. You carve a notch into the post by the door. It's your own secret tally of winter days survived. 20 notches now. A good stretch. Some winters the snow doesn't let up for twice that long. Historians still argue whether peasants owned their homes or merely occupied them at their lord's whim. In reality, ownership didn't matter much. As long as you worked the land and paid your dues, the hut was yours until you failed. Then it wasn't. The little things keep the place livable. Dried herbs hanging from the rafters, not just for cooking, but to mask the odor of damp socks, and worse, a chunk of fat wax candle carefully rationed to save your eyes. A painted bit of wood nailed over a hole in the wall, decorated with charcoal sketches of animals and odd symbols. Some say it wards off spirits. Others say it's just a doodle from a bored kid with access to burnt sticks. And yes, you hear that scratching again. You throw a boot at the beam. Silence, victory. It's not a haven. It's barely a shelter. But every beam, every smudge of soot, every stone in the floor holds a story. Your story. And come morning, when the rooster crows despite the cold, you'll step out of this stubborn little box of warmth and smoke and take another whack at surviving the season. You wake up stiff. Not the kind of stiff that goes away with a good stretch, but the deep, joint clinging kind that reminds you how few layers stand between your skin and the weather. The fire's out, of course it is. Embers barely hang on. You groan, reach for your outer tunic, and fumble around in the half-darkness for something dry. Spoiler, nothing is. Getting dressed in winter isn't a process. It's a scavenger hunt. The clothes you own, let's count, include a linen shift, a wool tunic, patched hose, and a half-decent cloak, if no one borrowed it during the night. Maybe you've got a hat. Maybe. You wrap a bit of fraying cloth around your hands and call them mittens. Everyone's clothes are variations on the same theme: itchy, musty, and the color of dirt. Because everything turns the color of dirt, eventually. You layer up as best you can, a walking bundle of threadbare defense against the cold. Some say layering is a new concept. Not for you. You're the medieval master of fashioning warmth out of thin linen and wishful thinking. Your undershirt hasn't been washed since All Saints' Day, and your outer tunic smells like old onions and sheep. But it's better than freezing. Slightly, outside, the snow crunches beneath your boots, or rather, the wrappings of cloth, tied around your feet to pretend they're boots. Leather footwear is rare, expensive, and likely inherited from someone already buried under the frost. If you've got a pair, they're probably stiff as dried meat and about as comfortable. You lace them tight and try not to think about the holes. Mainstream historical records confirm that wool was the peasant's best friend. It insulates even when damp, which is useful because you are always damp. Your cloak may be woven from rough, homespun wool, but it's warmish and hangs down enough to serve as a blanket when necessary. A fun little fact: in colder parts of Europe, people sometimes stuffed straw or moss into their clothes for insulation. It sounds ridiculous until you try it. It's not stylish, but it helps. Plus, nothing says fashion innovation like itchy plant material inside your trousers. You head toward the communal bread oven where the last few neighbors with grain have gathered. You're not baking today, your flour's long gone, but the oven radiates heat, and standing near it is a legally acceptable form of loitering. You pretend to poke at some embers while inching closer to warmth. The baker's daughter hands you a heel of bread too hard to bite and too precious to toss. You thank her with your eyes. Talking would let cold air in. Historians still argue whether peasants actually had winter wardrobes or simply wore their usual clothes until they disintegrated. Archaeological finds suggest multiple layers were worn, often with the outer garments heavily repaired or repurposed. Sewing skills weren't optional, they were survival tools. If you couldn't mend, you were either rich or cold. You pass a man on the road who looks like he's wearing 5 tunics and a sack. He probably is. One of the tunics belonged to his father. The sack is this year's innovation. You nod in respect. It takes creativity to stay warm. Wimples and hoods help too. You pull yours tight. It's greasy from weeks of wear, but that layer of grime is part of the insulation. You joke with your neighbor that the dirt keeps out the wind. He chuckles, then coughs for a full minute. You pretend not to notice. At home, your children are doing that familiar winter dance, the one where they keep moving, hopping, twisting, never still. Not for fun, just to stay warm. You tell them to sit near the hearth, and they do, shivering and silent. One tugs on a loose thread in his tunic until it unravels a full arm's length. A fringe belief held in some villages says wearing red keeps you warmer. There's no science behind it, of course. But if someone gifts you a bit of crimson cloth, you tie it around your wrist and swear it helps. At this point, you'll believe in anything that makes you feel less like a walking icicle. Later in the day, you gather with a few others under the eaves of the old mill. It's shielded from the wind, and sometimes you can find scraps of sackcloth blown loose from shipments. You use one to patch a hole in your cloak. A miller's boy calls it rat couture. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because laughing makes your cheeks tingle with warmth. A little. The sun sets early. Too early. You haven't been warm since you woke up, and you likely won't be until March. But you made it through another day, wrapped in wool, willpower, and whatever moss you could find. And tomorrow, more of the same. You pull your cloak tighter and tell yourself, you're warm enough. Almost. The hearth is more than just a fireplace. It's the soul of your home, the thing you orbit like a moth, the only reason your toes still exist. Right now, it's not roaring. It rarely is. But there are embers, glowing softly like a half-hearted promise. And tonight, that promise is everything. You kneel beside it, poking gently with a crooked stick that used to be part of a fence. You're coaxing it, whispering at it, maybe even bribing it with a shred of dried moss you found behind the granary. The fire answers with a sullen hiss, then, joy of joys, a flicker of flame. You cup your hands and blow with a kind of reverence. If the fire gods are real, this is how you pray. Your hearth isn't grand. It's a shallow pit, lined with stones, more black than gray now. The chimney is theoretical at best. Smoke travels out the thatch when it feels like it, and into your lungs the rest of the time. Everyone's eyes are red and itchy. You call it the winter look. Mainstream historians agree. In peasant homes, the hearth wasn't just for heat. It was the stove, the dryer, the nightlight, the gossip center, the germ factory. Everything happened here. It was your medieval microwave, radiator, and campfire, all rolled into one smoky centerpiece. You toss on a few splinters from the woodpile. You keep the good logs for nightfall. These are the soft, half-rotted ones. They burn fast and hiss like offended cats. Still, they give light, enough to see the walls, the outlines of sleeping figures, the mouse perched confidently on a wooden beam. A child stirs beside you, drawn by the fire's gentle crackle. She's wrapped in a blanket so worn, it's practically symbolic. She stretches a skinny hand toward the warmth, fingers splayed like flower petals. You push the ember pile closer and smile. It's a quiet victory. The woodpile is pitiful. You ration it with the precision of a king. You know how many nights a good log can last. 2, if you're clever. You've been clever for weeks now. You know which twigs spark best, which bark curls just right, which dung pats can be dried enough to feed the flames. Dung, by the way, burns surprisingly well. It's not glamorous, but neither is freezing. A fun tidbit? In some regions, dried animal dung was so important for winter fires that families stored it like gold, stacked high, protected from snow, sometimes even decorated. You haven't gone that far. Yet, your neighbor, old Milda, swears by peat. She digs it out of the marsh and dries it on her roof. Smells like the swamp is on fire when she burns it, but it works. You tried to steal some once. You got caught. You ended up helping her dig more. You're friends now. Mostly. Historians still debate whether rural peasants understood fire safety. The number of recorded house fires is low, but that might be because record keeping wasn't exactly a priority when your house was turning into ash. Regardless, your fire never roars. That would be dangerous. And well, a little greedy. Above the fire, you hang a small iron hook. It swings slightly from the heat. This is your kitchen, such as it is. You hang a battered pot over the coals and drop in whatever you scrounge that day. Today it's turnip peelings, a clove of garlic someone forgot to ask back for, and 2 suspiciously chewy bits of something you're not asking questions about. You stir slowly, letting the smell, faint but present, fill the room. Everyone perks up. You all pretend it smells like stew. It doesn't. But the fantasy keeps your belly from growling too loud. The baby, swaddled and sniffling, is placed nearest the hearth. It's a dangerous spot, but also the only one warm enough to prevent his little nose from freezing shut. You watch him carefully, adjusting the blankets with burnt fingertips. Tonight, you share firewood with the neighbor. You trade a half loaf of barley bread for a pine knot, resinous and bright. It burns fast and sweet. For a few minutes, the room feels almost cozy. Almost. You think of the manor house, of their big stone fireplace, wide enough to walk into, blazing merrily with logs thicker than your arm. You've never seen it, but the stories are vivid. They say you can roast a deer whole in there. You can't even roast an idea in yours. Still, there's something satisfying about your own flame. You built it, you fed it, you kept it alive. It's small, scrappy, and constantly on the verge of going out. Just like you. As night thickens, you bank the coals carefully. You arrange ashes over the embers like a blanket, trapping the heat, praying it survives until morning. If you're lucky, it will. If not, You'll wake into the dark, shaking, and have to start again from scratch. Flint, steel, dried moss, a whispered plea. One more glance at the hearth. The glow is steady now. Faint, but steady. It's not enough to melt the frost on the windows, but it's enough to keep your family alive another night. And in winter, that's the biggest win of all. You wake before the sun, mostly because your stomach is already growling and your toes have started a quiet protest. The fire, thank the saints, still has a breath of life in it. You stir it gently with a stick, revealing a few determined embers hiding beneath the ash like shy animals. You feed them a sliver of kindling, and they oblige you with a sleepy flicker of orange. Good morning warmth. The pot from last night is still hanging above the hearth. You remove the lid, brace yourself, and take a sniff. It's edible. Technically, a thin broth that used to have turnips, now mostly water and desperation. You take a sip and let the salty tang trickle down your throat. Not quite satisfying, but it's warm. You pass the rest to your eldest, who gulps it down like it's festival stew. Breakfast done, such as it is, it's time to deal with the day's biggest question: what's left to eat? Your pantry is more hope than substance these days. The grain stores are dangerously low. You lift the wooden lid off the chest and peer inside. A few handfuls of barley, maybe 2 shriveled onions, some garlic cloves with more green sprouts than bulb. You shake your head and close it before the disappointment can crawl any deeper into your chest. Mainstream historians note that food scarcity in winter was a brutal reality for most medieval villagers. Without preservation methods beyond drying, salting, or burying food underground, much of the harvest simply couldn't last through the coldest months. And when that failed, well, you got creative, or you went hungry. You step outside, your breath fogging the air instantly, and head to the root cellar. It's just a shallow pit dug into the ground, covered with a wooden lid and some hay. Inside there are a few wrinkled carrots, soft turnips, and some sort of squash that smells faintly of feet. You take them anyway, no one's judging. Especially not that squash. A fun tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, folks made soup stones, literal stones dropped into boiling water to create the illusion of cooking when you had nothing to cook. Add in a few herbs, maybe a bone if you were lucky, and voila, stone soup. Not filling, but oddly comforting. Back indoors, your family gathers as you prepare the main meal of the day. You chop the vegetables with a knife that's more rust than blade, toss everything into the pot, and stir like it's a royal feast. It's not, but the smell alone lifts the mood a little. The children watch, eyes wide. One suggests adding snow for volume. You laugh, then actually consider it. You scrape a bit of clean snow off the windowsill and stir it in. It waters it down, sure, but it stretches the pot. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants consistently endured near starvation during winter, or if that's an exaggerated trope. Some records suggest well-managed villages could survive on preserved grains and root vegetables. Others point out recurring famine years, where even rats became a delicacy. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle, and possibly at the bottom of your soup pot. Today, a neighbor brings over a gift, a small piece of dried meat. You trade her a spare turnip and half a candle. It's the kind of exchange that feels monumental. The meat is rabbit, or possibly something pretending to be rabbit. Either way, it adds richness to the stew that has everyone leaning in with hunger-bright eyes. You savor your portion slowly, letting the fat coat your tongue, chewing each bite like it's the last thing you'll ever eat. It very well might be. Later, you boil bones again to get one more round of broth. You've boiled the same bones 3 times already. At this point, they're mostly memory, but memory makes a fine seasoning. You remember the summer feast days. Honey cakes, berries, roast pork. You close your eyes and summon the taste. Sometimes imagination can feed the spirit, if not the belly. Your youngest chews on a piece of stale bread he found behind the sleeping mat. You watch, part horrified, part impressed. He seems fine, maybe a little stronger for it. Before bed, you pack the pot with snow and leave it by the fire. It'll melt overnight, and in the morning, you'll have a little warm water to wash your face. It's a small ritual, a bit of dignity in a season that tries to steal all of it. Tonight's stew is thinner than last night's, but it's hot, and there's enough for everyone. Barely. You sip, and you're grateful. You've made it through another day with full bellies, if not filled ones, and in winter that counts as a feast. The cough started with your neighbor 2 huts down, a low, chesty hack that echoed in the morning air like a warning bell. You tried to ignore it. Everyone coughs in winter, right? Smoke in the lungs, cold in the chest, straw dust in the nose. But now your youngest is sniffling. Your partner has that glassy look. And your own throat feels like sandpaper soaked in vinegar. You wrap another rag around your neck and tell yourself, it's just the cold. No one gets to stop working just because they're sick. If you lie down, you freeze. If you rest, the fire dies. So you keep moving, even as the chills wrap around your spine like greedy little hands. You bend to collect kindling and feel the tug in your back. Sharp, persistent, and somehow older than you. In a medieval village, illness is part of the landscape. Not just the big, dramatic plagues that sweep in and empty the church pews overnight, though those happen too, but the smaller, quieter kinds. Coughs that don't go away, fevers that flicker in the eyes, rashes, boils, and aches that whisper of something brewing just under the skin. Mainstream historians confirm that winter illness was a near constant companion. The cold weakened immune systems, poor nutrition left the body vulnerable, and smoke-filled homes, aggravated lungs, already working overtime. Add in cramped living, unwashed hands, and no understanding of germ theory, and you've got yourself a medieval cocktail of contagion. The healer, if you can call her that, is more bark than bedside manner. Old Marta has seen everything and survived half of it. She mixes a thick paste of honey, garlic, and vinegar and tells you to swallow it with your eyes shut and your sins confessed. You do as you're told, it burns. That means it's working. It means a quirky belief floats through the village. If you sleep with a dead mouse around your neck, it'll draw out the fever. You pass on that one. But you do let your mother-in-law tuck onion slices into your boots. She says it wards off chest rot. You smell like a stew, but your feet feel warmer, and that's good enough. You sit by the fire, sweating lightly. That's both good and bad. Good because it means your body's trying. Bad because if you cool off too fast, you'll wake up with icicles for eyelashes. So you wrap up tighter and sip from the warm broth you've been reheating all week. It tastes like regret, but feels like comfort. Historians still argue whether home remedies actually helped, or if they were mostly superstition. Some herbs, like thyme and yarrow, did have real medicinal value. Others, like powdered snail shells or powdered toad, were less effective. But belief, oddly enough, was its own kind of medicine. Hope warms like nothing else. You remember the time when 3 families shared a single pot of elderflower tea and passed it around like treasure? Everyone swore it shortened their cough. Or maybe they just wanted to believe it did. The tea was warm, and for a moment, so were their hearts. When the chills hit again, you rub your hands together so hard, they spark. You breathe on your fingers, like you're trying to light them up from the inside. The children pile onto your lap one by one, drawn by instinct and body heat. You cough into the crook of your arm and pat their heads with the other. This, you think, is medicine too. You hear someone outside throwing up. Probably old Toma. He's been eating dried apples he found behind the stable. Moldy, no doubt. You make a note to check on him in the morning, or send someone else. You spend the night half sleeping, half listening, for breathing, for movement, for that eerie silence that sometimes settles over a person just before it's too late. The baby wheezes a bit but keeps sleeping. You count that as a win. The next morning your cough is still there, but you're upright. Your knees crack. Your nose runs. Your back hates you. But you get the fire going. You stir the pot. You wash your face with snow and breathe deep. Even if it sounds like a broken bellows, you're still here. And sometimes, in a medieval winter, that's the best medicine of all. Darkness doesn't fall. It seeps in like damp through cloth. By late afternoon, the sky's already the color of iron, and by supper time, if you're lucky enough to have one, the world beyond your door is pitch black. You sit close to the hearth, the only glow in the house coming from that flickering flame. Every shadow stretches long and strange, dancing against the soot-black walls. Nightfall in a medieval winter isn't just inconvenient, it's ominous. There's no electricity, no switch to flip, no cozy glow from another room. When night comes, it swallows everything. Outside is the unknown, bitter cold, wolves howling in the distance and sounds you'd rather not try to explain. A branch creaks, an owl hoots, something scurries. You pull the blanket tighter and pretend not to care. You sleep together, your whole family lined up like spoons in a drawer. It's not just for affection, it's for survival. Body heat is the only heating system you've got. You share breath, coughs, warmth, and dreams. If someone kicks in their sleep, someone else yelps, but no one moves. You've got to stay close. Mainstream historians remind us that medieval nights were often terrifying, especially in winter. Darkness wasn't romantic, it was risky. Illness got worse. Bandits crept about. Wolves and other animals grew bold when hunger gnawed. But the worst thing, truly, was the isolation. You couldn't see who or what was out there. Your door creaks in the wind. It's just wood and a latch. No lock, no bolt. If something wants in, it comes in. That thought crosses your mind as the fire pops, throwing an unexpected shadow across the ceiling. You flinch, then sigh, just the beam shifting again. Or was it? The baby whimpers. You bounce your knee gently, shushing with a whispered hum. A song your mother sang when she was young. A song about spring. You can't remember all the words, but it doesn't matter. The rhythm keeps you calm. A fun detail? In some villages, people left bowls of milk outside at night for spirits. hoping the offering would keep mischief at bay. Others carved protective runes into the doorframe or hung herbs in bunches. You've done all three. Can't hurt, right? Tonight, a storm blows in. You hear it whistle through the thatch, tugging at the roof like a drunk trying to peel back a curtain. You weigh down the ceiling flap with a rock, just in case. Someone once told you that the wind can carry away your dreams. You've had worse stolen, so you don't take chances. Historians still argue whether the medieval mindset saw nighttime more as danger or divine mystery. The church said night was a time of sin and spiritual testing. Folk tales warned of creatures that walked only in darkness, black dogs, faceless men, whispering ghosts. But others saw night as sacred, a time when the world held still and secrets could be heard. You whisper to the fire. It's something you've always done. Not words exactly, just a murmur, like a promise. Stay lit, you think? Stay with us. One of your children wakes in a panic, a nightmare. You soothe him quickly, gently. He says the wolves were inside this time. You tell him, no, they're just hungry, same as us. He nods. Somehow that makes it okay. Sleep comes slowly. You count breaths. You count the pops in the fire. You count the stars you think might still be shining above, though you'll never see them through the clouds and smoke. Your body aches in 6 different places, but you're still grateful. For the warmth, for the roof, for the noises not being wolves. You start to drift, then stop. Was that? You hold your breath. Nothing. Just the wind playing with the edges of your world. You finally let yourself sleep, but lightly, like someone sleeping near a river that might flood. One ear always open. And outside, the night waits, but you've made it through another one. That's enough. You wake to the sound of bells. Not the kind you wear. Those are festival fare, tucked away with the good linen, but the solemn clang from the chapel down the hill. It rings slowly, a single chime at a time, pulled by hand, echoing through the frozen mist, like the breath of something older than the village itself. It's Sunday, or at least it might be. You've long lost track of days in this thick gray soup of winter, but when the bells ring like that, it means gather. It means mass. It means the church is warm, or warmish, and you're allowed to sit still for an hour without someone asking why you aren't working. You bundle yourself in the usual patchwork and nudge the kids awake. They grumble, but church is one of the few outings they look forward to. Not because they're devout, though you all are in your own drafty, soot-streaked way, but because it means movement, light, sometimes even singing. And sometimes on very lucky days, the priest gives out bread, dry as parchment, but still bread. As you trudge down the snowy path, your boots crunch and your breath clouds the air in slow puffs. Other villagers are emerging from their huts too, like frost-bitten squirrels. You nod at them. No one speaks. It's too cold for pleasantries. The chapel stands crooked on its hill, part stone, part timber, all faith. A single candle flickers in the narrow window. Inside, the smell hits you immediately. Wax, damp wool, and old wood. It's not warm exactly, but it feels warmer than your hut, mostly because you're not alone. Mainstream historians point out that the medieval church wasn't just a place of worship. It was a community center, a courtroom, a message board, a warm room with walls that didn't leak much. For villagers in the dead of winter, it was sometimes the only structured break from survival. You shuffle in and sit on the bench, careful not to let your skin touch the frozen iron nails holding it together. The priest begins his sermon, his breath visible with every syllable. He talks about patience, about the suffering of the saints, about how even Job would have needed thicker socks. You don't catch every word. Your mind wanders. You count the cracks in the wall. You count the stones in the floor. You stare at the stained glass, a crude image of a lion and a lamb, more patch than art. Still, the light through it is beautiful, reds and blues dancing on the stone. It makes the children gasp quietly. A quirky village tradition plays out after the service. The priest blesses small bundles of straw, handing one to each household. You're supposed to place it under the hearth at night to keep spirits from stealing your warmth. You smile as you tuck it into your cloak. You're not superstitious, but again, can't hurt. You linger after the Mass, just a bit. The heat from the packed bodies, the candle smoke, the wooden walls, all of it feels like a blanket, a scratchy, holy blanket. You exchange news with your neighbor. The cow gave birth. Someone fell through the ice. Old Tom is still coughing, but insists he's fine. You nod through it all, pocketing the details like breadcrumbs leading through the cold. Historians still debate how much peasants truly believed versus how much they simply hoped. Religion was everywhere. Yes, but was it comfort, control, community? Probably all three. But here today, you feel it as warmth on your cheek, flickering from a tiny candle and a larger hope. On your way out, you pass the graveyard. Fresh snow covers the mounds, softening the harshness. You glance at one with a crooked cross. No name, just a memory. Winter takes who it wants. You walk home slowly, carrying your straw blessing. And something else. Maybe the echo of a hymn, maybe the last bit of warmth from shared breath, maybe just the reminder that you're not alone in this endless frost. Back at the hut, the fire's gone out again, but your heart's still warm. Time to start it up one more time. The first sign of real trouble is the silence. Not the peaceful kind, like when snow falls gently on a quiet morning, but a hollow, stomach-sinking stillness. No chickens clucking, no children squabbling, no footsteps trudging past your door. Just wind. You open your pantry again. Not out of hope, just habit. And sure enough, it looks the same. Bare shelves, a few wrinkled root vegetables, a smear of what might have once been lard. You close it slowly, as if making less noise will stretch your food supply. The cellar's worse. Where there was once a comforting heap of potatoes and turnips now sit just a few defiant sprouts. One carrot has grown a little white beard. You pluck it anyway. You're hungry. Your whole body is one long growl. Your head feels light, like it might float off if not for the heavy ache in your belly. You're past the point of craving and deep into bargaining. You think, maybe if I eat slow, it'll trick my stomach. You know better. You eat slow anyway. Mainstream historians are unanimous on this one. Winter famine was a cyclical curse in the medieval world. It came in waves, often after a poor harvest, worsened by lack of preservation, storage, or access. There were no imports, no relief programs. If your village starved, it starved together. The village gossip begins to swirl. Someone mentions that the Miller's family hasn't been seen in days. Someone else says old Thoma's finally passed. Found, curled up near his hearth, a crust of bread in one hand. You don't want to believe it, but you do. You always do. The baby's cries sound different now. Not fussing, desperate, sharp, jagged little sobs that make you wince. Your partner presses a scrap of bread softened in warm water to his lips. He takes it, but it's not enough. It never is. You boil water and add chopped onion peelings, a scrap of dried beet, and a few foraged leaves someone swears are edible. The result is a bowl of sadness, but it's warm sadness, and that matters. Here's a quirky remedy you try out of sheer desperation. You hang a piece of iron over the doorframe and spit on it. A superstition meant to drive hunger spirits away. You feel ridiculous doing it, but you do it anyway. Someone, somewhere, once believed it worked. Historians still argue whether starvation led to cannibalism in rural medieval villages. Some records hint at it, others deny it fiercely. Either way, in your village, it remains a whispered warning, never spoken aloud. Instead, you dream of feasts, of meat, cakes, and berries bursting with juice. You wake up chewing nothing but air. Your neighbors begin trading odd things: a comb for a crust, a shoe for a slice of dried pear. You swap a wooden spoon you carved last summer for a handful of barley flour. You'll miss the spoon. It had personality. But flour means dumplings. Dumplings mean hope. Someone starts boiling tree bark. You're not sure who, but the smell is sharp and bitter, and it lingers in your nose like a dare. You resist. For now, a villager you rarely speak to shows up at your door with 2 eggs and a sheepish look. He wants firewood. You'd normally refuse, but today, you give him the logs. You don't even haggle. Eggs are gold. You scramble them that night with wild greens and pretend it's a feast. And still, the hunger clings to you like damp cloth. You find yourself staring at the candle too long, wondering what tallow tastes like. You find yourself watching the pig with different eyes. One night, someone sneaks into a neighbor's storage. They're caught. A scuffle breaks out. The thief's fingers are broken with a stone, and he's left outside to cool off. You don't see him again. Whether he left or froze, well, no one asks. Your fire grows weaker. You stretch the embers with moss and scraps of lint. You tear up your oldest linen rag, feeding it slowly to the flames like it's a hungry child. It barely responds. The silence deepens. And then one morning you hear something, the sharp, unmistakable sound of snow sliding from a roof, followed by another sound, bird song, a single chirp, tentative, almost shy. You don't smile, not yet, but your stomach tightens, not from hunger this time, from the tiniest flicker of hope. You wake with frost on your eyelashes and your knees drawn up to your chest, like you've been trying to curl into a warmer version of yourself. The fire's long gone. You can tell by the way the cold has taken on a sort of shape. It wraps around you like a damp blanket, heavy and inescapable. Your breath plumes in the still air. Someone stirs. Your eldest. He stretches, then hunches forward immediately, rubbing his hands together with the desperation of someone who knows there's no heat coming unless he makes it. You nod at him. That's how mornings go now. No words, just motions. Words are saved for bargaining. And speaking of that, you've got things to trade. Not many, but enough to venture out. You bundle yourself tightly. The patched cloak, the same tunic, your trusty rag mittens, a twist of dried grass stuffed in your shoes for warmth. You step outside and blink into the dull light. No snow falling today. That counts as a blessing. Sort of. You walk slowly, because hurrying makes you sweat, and sweat turns to ice under your clothes. Besides, you don't have the strength. The hunger is a quiet roar now, always humming just beneath your skin. The village square, if it can be called that, is busier than usual, not with joy, not with celebration, with people just standing, hovering, watching. Every movement is calculated, every glance is a question. Who has what? Who needs what? What will you give me for that? Mainstream historians often point out that bartering was the backbone of peasant survival in the winter months. With coins scarce and supplies scarcer, peasants relied on a complex, unspoken system of trade. Eggs for wool, turnips for candles, a single nail for a pinch of salt. You make your first trade with Widow Burla. She's got firewood, 3 small logs. You offer her a cloth doll your daughter used to sleep with, plus a small bag of ashes, good for making lye. She squints at you, then hands over the wood. No words, just a grim nod. The doll disappears into her cloak. Maybe she's got a grandchild somewhere. You move on. At the edge of the path, you spot a boy selling fish. Well, fishish. It's a frozen lump with eyes. Could be anything. He claims it's trout. You suspect rat. Doesn't matter. You trade a woven charm from your door frame and one of your last onions. He tosses you the fish lump and you try not to let it touch your skin. Nearby, a man has animal fat, rendered down, clean, glowing like gold. You want it? Badly? But all you have left is a bent spoon and an old horseshoe. He shakes his head. You walk away. Then pause. You offer your boots. He looks at you like you're mad. Maybe you are. You hold up one, then the other. He shrugs, takes them, and hands over a thumb-sized jar of fat. You walk home in socks and grass, feet numb but heart buzzing. Fat means stew. Fat means calories. Fat means something close to happiness. A quirky practice you overhear. Someone's bartering prayers now. 3 Ave Marias for a cup of milk. It's not unheard of. Spiritual services count as trade in tough times. The old woman offering them says her prayers go straight to St. Bridget. You don't trade today, but you tuck the thought away. Historians still debate how much value peasants placed on personal items in times of famine. Some say sentimentality gave way completely to utility. Others insist people clung to heirlooms, charms, and keepsakes, even as they starved. Looking down at your now bootless feet, you wonder which side you're on. Back home, your partner blinks at your haul like you've returned from war. You light the fire with Widow Burla's logs. The fish, or whatever it is, goes into the pot with some greens and a spoon of the fat. It hisses and spits. The smell is incredible. No one even complains about the bones. The children eat fast. You eat slower. Not because you want to savor it, though you do, but because your stomach's shrunk so much that even this feast might be too much too fast. That night you lie beside the fire, with warm bellies and sore feet. Someone hums a song. Someone else burps. The baby sleeps without crying. It's not joy exactly, but it's something close. And in this winter, something close is enough. Today you walk past the manor house. Not on purpose. It just happens to loom beside the path leading to the frozen stream, where you're hoping to gather water through a hole someone's already broken. You weren't planning to look up. You usually don't. But your eyes betray you. There it is, stone walls rising higher than your hut is long. Chimneys, real chimneys, puffing long white coils into the sky. You can smell the wood smoke, rich and piney. It's almost sweet. And something else too. Roasted meat, that unmistakable savory tang. Your mouth waters like it wants to sob. You pull your cloak tighter and force your eyes back to the ground. Looking too long feels dangerous, like you might accidentally dream of something you can't afford. Still, you glance up again. A figure in a fur-lined robe stands in the manor's doorway, barking at a servant. The servant nods, hands clasped, and then disappears into the warm, candle-lit innards of the house. You catch a glimpse of firelight flickering through stained glass. You imagine stepping inside, just once, sitting by a real fire, drinking something hot out of a metal cup that isn't dented, wearing shoes with no holes. Mainstream historians paint a clear picture of the divide between noble and peasant life in winter. The lords had stone houses, roaring fires, salted meats, imported spices, and actual beds. Peasants had straw, smoke, and wishful thinking. The inequality wasn't just economic, it was visible, tangible, and constant. Your neighbor told you once that the manor's dogs eat better than half the village. You thought he was exaggerating. Then you saw a boy from the manor throw a turkey bone into the ditch last year. You still remember how 4 people scrambled after it. Today, the stream's ice is thicker than yesterday. It takes 15 minutes to chip through. Your fingers go numb. Your toes, wrapped in ragged cloth since your boot trade, scream with every step. You think again of those fires behind the stone walls, the roast, the softness, the ease. A quirky rumor has made its way through the village. The Lord's Lady takes milk baths, not to drink, to bathe in. The idea seems so absurd it might be heresy. Milk. You haven't seen milk in weeks. If it were true, it would explain why her skin is so pale and her face always looks like she just stepped out of a painting. You haul 2 buckets home, shoulders screaming, and tell yourself to forget the manor. But it lingers in your mind like a dream you don't want to remember. That night, your partner mentions the Lord in passing, how his land taxes haven't lessened even though the harvest was pitiful. You both laugh, dry and bitter. There's a joke you all tell when someone's roof collapses or the cow dies. At least the Lord's wine is warm. It's not funny, but it's true. And sometimes true things are the best jokes. Historians still argue whether resentment among peasants brewed into rebellion during these long winters. Some say yes, the cold made the injustice harder to swallow. Others say no, hunger made people compliant, too tired to fight. Either way, you know what you feel. And it's not quite rebellion, but it's not peace either. One of the children asks what the inside of the manor is like. You hesitate. Then you lie. You say it's full of rats, that it's drafty and cold, that their food is bland, that their floors are muddy and their boots too tight. The child nods solemnly, believes you. You do not. As you go to sleep, your hands raw from the water buckets, you think of the roast meat smell again. You imagine a table, a loaf of bread the size of your head, butter melting into it, a fire behind you, a cushion beneath you. No chores, no hunger, No trade-offs, just warmth. Then the wind shifts and your own hearth crackles. You look around. Your family piled like puppies under mismatched blankets. The pot steaming faintly. The pig alive and snoring. And you think maybe this too is a kind of wealth. You wake up to stillness. Not the good kind, like a rare, peaceful morning, but the heavy, pressed kind. The fire has gone out again. The breath of the hut hangs in the air like smoke. Your joints ache worse than usual, and even the children sleep quietly, too quietly. Something's different today. You feel it in your bones before you even sit up. There's no crying from the neighbor's hut. No sound at all, in fact. That's the first clue. You step outside, shivering, as the morning wind needles through your layers. Frost crunches underfoot, thin and brittle, like the world's about to crack open. You see two figures down the path, heads bowed, carrying something between them. A third figure follows, slow and steady, holding a small wooden cross. And just like that, it hits you. Someone didn't make it. You don't ask who, you'll find out soon enough. Mainstream historical records show that winter mortality rates among peasants were often highest in February, late enough that supplies had run out, but too early for the relief of spring. Illness, starvation, and sheer exhaustion took their toll. And when someone passed, the village didn't stop. It sighed. You follow quietly, your own breath sounding loud in your ears. The little procession moves toward the edge of the churchyard where the ground has been hacked at with picks to loosen the frost. A shallow grave dug yesterday, probably in anticipation. It happens that way sometimes. Someone gets the feeling. The priest is already there, muttering the rites. You catch the name Toma. Old Toma, the one who always smelled like dried apples and carried a knife, sharpened so thin it was practically invisible. He hadn't been well for weeks. You'd seen the shaking in his hands. He used to carve trinkets for the children, little animals and birds. Your youngest still has one, a wooden duck with one wing. The service is short. No time or energy for long goodbyes in the cold. The dirt is tossed, the cross is planted. People bow their heads, then they go home. Except one child stays behind a little longer. You don't know her name, she just stares at the ground where Toma now lies. Maybe you made her a duck too. Historians still argue how medieval communities processed grief during the long winters. Some say loss was accepted with a grim practicality. There was no room for sentiment when you had to feed 6 mouths with 3 potatoes. Others insist that even the poorest peasants marked their dead with quiet rituals and lasting sorrow. You believe both. Today proves it. When you return to your hut, the air inside feels different, like the walls heard the news and absorbed it. Your partner says nothing, but you both move slower. The children sense something's off. No one laughs today, not even the pig. You busy yourself with little tasks, fixing a rip in the blanket, resorting the woodpile, stirring the stew, even though it doesn't need stirring. Motion helps. Stillness hurts. A quirky belief shared by many villagers. You shouldn't sweep your floor the day after someone dies. It's said to scatter their soul, so you leave the straw and dirt where it lies, even though you stepped in something cold near the door. Superstition or not, some rules are meant to be honored. Later, someone brings a gift, a tiny sack of barley flour, and a folded square of cheesecloth. Toma owed you this, they say. You don't argue. You accept it with a nod and a murmured prayer. You'll use the cloth to wrap tomorrow's bread, a quiet way to remember. That night, your partner lights a second candle. It's extravagant. It shortens your supply, but you let it burn anyway. For Toma, for warmth, for light in a season that feels darker than usual. You whisper stories to the children before bed about a man who carved animals and never ran out of stories. You change the ending. In your version, he simply wandered into the woods to find a better spring, and maybe in some kinder place he did. The wind rattles your shutters like it's trying to barter entry. You ignore it, of course. There's nothing left to trade. Not outside. Instead, you sit near the hearth. What's left of it anyway? Tending to a brew that smells more like a damp garden than soup. It's medicine, allegedly. A bundle of dried herbs, mostly thyme and mugwort, maybe a nettle or two, simmers in the pot. You're not entirely sure what it's supposed to cure. Chest rot, coughing fits, general despair. Old Marta gave you the bundle and said, "This'll help." Probably. That's as good as science gets in the village. You fish out a strand of something slimy and give the mix a tentative sniff. It smells sharp, earthy, slightly like boiled socks. You wrinkle your nose but drink anyway. Mainstream historians agree that while medieval medicine was often laughably ineffective, it was also strangely persistent. Remedies passed down through generations were rarely challenged. If someone said it worked once, that was good enough to keep trying for decades. Who needs proof when you've got hope? Your neighbor swears by a honey and cobweb salve. Another insists that burying garlic under your doorway keeps bad spirits and bad smells away. You've tried both. Your house still stinks and your cough remains, but your doorway does feel safer. That counts, right? A particularly strange old practice makes the rounds this winter. Whispering your illness into the bark of a tree, then walking away and not looking back. It's supposed to transfer your sickness to the tree. You tried it once last week, muttering your aches into a bent birch by the stream. You haven't felt better exactly, but the tree looks worse. So maybe a child in the hut has started sucking on a lump of dried pine sap. Not because anyone told them to, just instinct, probably. You let it happen. It can't hurt, and it keeps them quiet. Historians still debate whether these quirky remedies were genuine belief or just acts of desperation dressed as tradition. Some say they were the best available science. Others call them rituals of control in an uncontrollable world. Either way, you keep boiling leaves and muttering charms. Because what else is there? You remember your grandmother's old trick, heating a stone in the fire, wrapping it in cloth, and placing it at the foot of the bed. Not exactly warm, but warmer. You do it again tonight. The children cuddle up close to it, giggling at the heat like it's magic. There's an elder in the village who tells fortunes. She can't walk, but her eyes are sharp as fish hooks. You brought her a crust of bread last week, and she looked at your hands and said, "You'll see spring." You didn't ask how she knew, you just held on to it. Another fun tidbit. In some places, people believed that writing the name of a saint on your skin in charcoal could drive out fever. You tried that too once, on your forearm. Saint Apollonia in shaky letters. You think she's the patron of teeth. Your fever didn't break, but your toothache did. Coincidence? Maybe. But you haven't scrubbed the name off. At supper, if it can be called that, you pour a bit of your herbal tea into the pot to stretch the broth. It turns a funny green. You all sip it like you're royalty, clinking wooden spoons. Someone makes a face. Someone else says, "Tastes like wet moss." You all laugh, and it's the real kind. The belly shaking, tears welling kind. Laughter, still the best cure going. You mend a hole in your tunic by candlelight, humming one of the old songs that's supposed to keep illness from returning. You forget half the words, make up the rest. The rhythm matters more than the meaning. Before sleep, you hang a bunch of dried rosemary over the door. You found it in the bottom of a basket you thought was empty. A sign? A gift? Doesn't matter, it smells wonderful. And for a moment, your hut smells less like boiled onion and more like something you might actually want to live in. The wind howls again, but you pull the blanket tighter, the heat stone still warm at your feet, and the children curled in like kittens. Tomorrow you'll whisper to the birch again. Tonight you believe you just might wake up feeling better. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the healing you need. It happens slowly, so slowly you almost don't believe it at first. A drip, just one, then another. A tiny, quiet plink against the wooden barrel outside. You think it might be a dream. You step outside, squinting against the pale gray sky. And there it is. A single drop sliding down from the corner of the roof, followed by two more. It's melt. You blink. You touch the drip with one stiff finger and rub it between your thumb and palm like it's oil from a holy relic. The thatch is glistening. The icicles look thinner than yesterday. The air smells different. Not sweet, not warm, just less cold. And in winter, that alone feels miraculous. Your neighbors notice too. You see someone standing outside barefoot, briefly, just to feel the slush between their toes. A child runs across the yard without their hat on, gets shouted at, and just laughs. You haven't heard laughter like that in months. Inside the hut, the fire starts more easily today, less damp in the logs. The smoke rises straighter. You cough, yes, but not as much. The soup simmers a little faster, and your hands don't shake when you stir. Mainstream historians often note that the first signs of thaw in late winter weren't cause for celebration yet, just cautious optimism. A false spring could sneak in, tempt the hopeful, and disappear in a blizzard. But still, the melt was something, a shift, a whisper of a promise. You look toward the woods. The snow there is still thick, the trees still hunched under white weight, but the air has that thing to it, that wet earth smell, like the ground's remembering it, has work to do. Your youngest finds a worm, a real squirming worm in the mud just beside the wall. They carry it into the house like a knight returning from a quest. You all gather to marvel. It's gross, it's wriggly, it's absolutely beautiful. A quirky local tradition begins today. Someone stakes a green branch, half dead, half alive, into the snow at the village edge. The thaw's begun, they announce. Everyone cheers, quietly. You don't want to spook it. You go about your chores differently now, slower but lighter. The laundry hung near the hearth actually dries instead of just steaming endlessly. The pig makes a noise that isn't a complaint, just conversation. The children squabble again, which weirdly feels like peace returning. Historians still argue whether peasants marked the shift in seasons by calendar or just gut instinct. In truth, you know it in your bones. A stiffness lessened, a breeze that doesn't cut, a puddle where a snowbank was. You trade for eggs again today. Real eggs, not a promise. And the woman who sells them smiles with her eyes, not just her mouth. You boil them that night and everyone eats quietly, reverently. It's the first meal in weeks. No one tries to stretch with extra broth. Later you crack open the window hole just a little. Let some of the thaw-scented air in. It's still cold, but not cruel. The air nips, but it doesn't bite. A small bird lands on your thatch. A robin. You stare at it like it's a messenger from another world. The children name it, then rename it, then argue about it. You let them. That night you bank the fire with confidence. You even leave a small chunk of wood untouched. That's right. You saved a log. You madman. You sleep better? Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's the worm. Maybe it's the eggs. But when you close your eyes, the dreams aren't about famine or frost. They're about green. Green fields, green leaves, green hope. Spring isn't here yet, but it's close enough to smell. The thaw doesn't come with trumpets. It doesn't arrive with birdsong and flowers and angelic beams of sunlight pouring through the trees. It comes quietly, like a guest who lets themselves in without knocking, then sits in the corner and slowly warms the room by just being there. You wake, and there's water dripping in the corner. Not from a leak, but from the roof, finally letting go of its icicle burden. Your bed straw's damp, and for once, that's a good thing. It means the frost beneath it has melted. The floor is a mud pit. Again, good. Outside, the world has become slush. Slush and muck and unsteady ground. You can hear the sound of boots sucking against mud all morning. People swear about it under their breath, but they're grinning as they do. You haven't seen teeth, actual smiles in weeks. You walk past the same bent birch you whispered your sickness into. The bark is peeling now, curling at the edges. You nod at it as you pass. "Thanks," you whisper. It doesn't reply, but you swear it shifts a little in the wind. Inside the hut, everything stinks. The melting snow has unearthed smells you forgot existed. Moldy rushes, pig droppings, socks, old Thoma's trinkets, which now look less magical and more like bits of wood, with faces. But all of it is yours. All of it lived through winter. You hear the church bells again, but this time it's not for a funeral. It's Sunday, and the priest's voice cracks with emotion as he says a prayer of thanks. You kneel on a dry patch of stone, feeling something close to awe. Not because of the words, but because you're still here to hear them. Mainstream historians note that the arrival of spring in medieval villages wasn't celebrated with festivals right away. There were still lean days ahead. Seeds had to be sown, tools repaired, fences fixed. But even so, it marked the end of a brutal trial, a collective exhale. You begin the seasonal shift. You open up the grain bin to clean it, even if it's empty. You start planning where the new turnip patch will go. The kids dig for worms, not to eat this time, but to fish with. You dream of fish again, not frozen lumps, but real fish. Slick, silver, flicking out of the stream like stories returning to the water. Your partner washes the linens, yes, all of them. It takes hours, days maybe, but the smell of fresh washed cloth hung in wet air, it's the scent of survival. One evening your neighbor brings over something wrapped in cloth, a loaf, a whole loaf of bread. He says his cow calved early and the milk gave enough for cheese, and the cheese got traded for flour. And the flour? Well, it turned into this loaf. You stare at it like it's a miracle, which of course it is. A quirky local tradition unfolds. Villagers gather to hang small bundles of dried herbs on their doors, left over from winter. They call them sleep charms to thank the house for not collapsing. You make one too. You add a piece of garlic peel, a red thread, and one of old Toma's wooden ducks. It feels right. Historians still argue whether the scars of winter ever truly faded. Malnutrition lingered, illness resurfaced. But they agree on this. Spring, even the soggy, hesitant kind, brought a renewed will, a readiness, a fire that didn't come from wood but from inside. That night you sit by the hearth with your family. The fire is strong, the soup is thick, the laughter is full, and when you close your eyes, it's not to escape the cold, but to rest from the work of living. You've made it, not to paradise, not to peace, but to the part where things begin again, and somehow that's enough. The fire glows steady now, its orange light casting soft shadows across the wall. Your feet are warm beneath the blanket, and the soft breathing of your family fills the room like a lullaby. Outside, the wind still rustles through bare branches, but it no longer bites. It simply passes by, like an old friend saying goodnight. You lie there, eyes half closed, listening to the familiar creaks of your home settling in for the night. The smell of stew still lingers faintly in the air, along with a hint of smoke and something herbal, maybe the rosemary charm above the door. Your muscles are sore, but it's the kind of soreness that comes from effort rewarded. The pig snores. The children stir and roll over, seeking each other's warmth. And your thoughts grow slow and soft, like moss growing over stone. You think about the earth, waking gently beneath its blanket of thawing snow. You imagine little roots stretching, tiny shoots dreaming of light. Somewhere deep down, the world is preparing to bloom again, and so are you. Tomorrow there will be chores, yes, hunger again perhaps, another frost maybe. But tonight, you've earned the quiet. Let your breath slow. Let your hands unclench. Let the warmth sink in. You are safe. You are home. You are here. And spring is coming.